for myself. And so I'm actually going to share with you later after I make the first half how to make the second half, and then we'll attach it together. But if you can see, it looks like a keyboard, which is really cool. I've been playing a little bit of piano, so I've been inspired. But today we're just going to continue our project. Whatever you're working on, I'm working on this, and we're going to listen to another episode of Crime Junkie. This one is an old episode from December 17, 2017, and it's called Murdered Laci Peterson. The story everyone thinks they know, but do you really? In part 1, we cover Laci's disappearance and the suspicion that fell on her husband, Scott Peterson. Let's just get right into it. Get your project out and let's listen. And again, this is a murder podcast, so if you're a child, maybe don't listen to it.
Everyone, the day has finally come. Copy of All Good Imagined. Crime Junkie is brought to you by the Capital One Venture X card. When you book through Capital One Travel using the Venture X card, you earn 10x miles on hotels and rental cars and Hi everyone, welcome back to the second episode of Crime Junkie. I am your host, Ashley Flowers, as always, joined by Britt.
Hi.
And we would love nothing more than if you would leave us a rating and review on iTunes. The only way more people can find the show and hear about the show is if you guys do ratings and reviews. And it's the only way that we can keep bringing you new content and crazy stories like the story I'm about to tell you today. Before we jump into that, though, we'd love to tell you a little bit about our favorite nonprofit organization, Crime Stoppers. Goes around E3 that you can download and submit.
Honestly, I was kind of surprised you chose this one because it's obviously really well known and, in my opinion, kind of cut and dry. I mean, Scott did it. Scott did it. Scott did it. Scott did it.
But that's the thing. Okay, so I feel like if anyone has the same attitude that you do, they definitely need to listen close to this episode because I thought I knew this case inside and out until I really started digging into the facts. And I know absolutely nothing. Like, nothing I know to be true is true. And there are so many twists and turns that never, I don't know if it's because we're so far away here in Indiana, but like it never made it to us through the media, or if the media was intentionally covering up all of these things, but it's not cut and dry. He maybe didn't do it.
Well, I'm excited for you to maybe change my mind.
All right, so we're going to start the day before Laci goes missing. She and Scott have a really normal day. First, they go to her sister's salon, and Scott gets a haircut, and they actually invite her over for dinner that night, but she already has plans, so she doesn't come over. And around 8:30, Laci calls her mom to confirm plans for Christmas Eve dinner. Christmas Eve is the next day. And after she gets off the phone with her mother, they go to bed. They are watching a movie in bed till about 10:30 when they fall asleep. Now, the next day, this is the critical December 24th, 2002, when Laci is officially reported missing. And the only account we have from this day obviously comes from Scott because he was the only person who was with her. And he says the day starts around 7 to 7:30 is when Laci wakes up and eats breakfast, and he gets up between 8 and 8:30. And around 8:45, 9:45, Laci's telling Scott all of her plans for the day. She wants to walk the dog. She needs to go to the store because it's her responsibility. She's bringing this like French toast Christmas casserole brunch, or casserole to the brunch that she organized with her mother. And she has to go pick up all the ingredients. And actually the recipe for this casserole was on her kitchen counter. So that kind of lends credence to his story. And around 9:45, he says that he and her were watching Martha Stewart that morning, and she was talking about making some kind of lemon meringue cookie or something like that. And shortly after this, sometime within the next 40 minutes, Laci is mopping the floor, and Scott starts packing up his truck and decides to leave because he was going to go golfing, but it was really too cold that day, and he decides that he is going to take his new boat out and go fishing instead. So he's got a 9-minute drive to this warehouse that he keeps where he holds his boat, and it's kind of like a little office. It's got this computer, and so while he's driving there, the police have records. He checks his voicemail at 10:08, and the voicemail was from his boss. So when he gets to his warehouse, he actually gets on the computer, and there's records to show that he was actively using his computer from 10:30 in the morning to 10:56 in the morning. And he sends an email to his boss replying to the email, and then he looks up instructions on how to assemble this woodworking tool that he had just gotten in the mail a couple of days ago. And at this point, we have about 20 minutes that's unaccounted for of his time. But later the prosecution, what everyone says is in this 20 minutes he's wrapping up a body, he's attaching weights, he's doing whatever it is he's doing. It's depending on how you look at it, it's either sinister or not. But what they do find is when they come back to the warehouse, that tool that he had just received in the mail was fully assembled. So it's really possible that in these 20 minutes he was actually assembling the tool that he had looked up instructions to assemble.
Makes sense.
So he then leaves and goes to the marina, and he gets an actual ticket at 12:54 showing that he arrived at the boat dock and was going to launch his boat. And so he gets his boat backed up and into the water, and he, from 12:55 to 2:11, is out fishing. And there are actually people who saw him back up his boat, load up his boat, and launch. And the thing here is you would think, again, everyone's theory is that he dumped Laci in the Berkeley Marina or somewhere in the bay. You would think someone would have seen her body. I mean, they saw him launch. It's a 14-foot little fishing boat. It's not some yacht that he can hide her body below. So he launches off. People see him. They don't say anything, but who knows? So many questions surrounding that. He ends up leaving between 2:15 and 3:25. He gets his boat docked up, and this is where we kind of hear a famous call of him calling Laci to let her know that he was on his way home. And I call it the "Hey Beautiful" call.
Hey Beautiful, I just left a message at home. 2:15. I was in Berkeley. I won't be able to get to Villa Farms to get that basket for Papa. I was hoping you would get the message and go on out there. I'll see you in a bit, sweetie. Love you. Bye.
So he's coming back at this point, stops for gas. He actually tries to call Laci again, and he arrives back at his warehouse at 4:13. And he packs everything up and gets home between 4:30 and 4:45, which matches perfectly if he's going to load up his stuff and then make the 9-minute drive back home. And at this point, he notices a couple of weird things. So Laci's car is in the driveway, but Laci isn't home. And he says at this point, he makes the assumption that Laci's mom came over and picked her up, and they went, Christmas shopping, or she went over to help prepare the Christmas Eve dinner or whatever it was. But he's not immediately concerned. The door is unlocked, and their dog, Mackenzie, is in the backyard with her leash still on, which is a little bizarre because he said that, anyone with a dog doesn't just leave their dog in the yard with the leash on if they're not being tied up or something like that. So he takes the leash off, and then Laci had been mopping earlier, if you'll remember, when he left. He said that there was dirty mop water still, so he dumps that out. And then he decides to go shower and wash his clothes. And this is huge for everyone who is against Scott. They're saying, why on earth would the first thing you do is your wife isn't home, and you come home and you shower and you wash your clothes? And he says, well, again, I wasn't super concerned, and I stunk. I was fishing, I freak. So he wanted to jump in the shower, and then he's like, it was super normal. If I go to my workshop, I'm often around a lot of chemicals. I have a pregnant wife at home, so a lot of the times, the first thing I'll do is put my clothes in the wash and just start the wash. You know what I mean? It's not like you're washing them by hand. You just press a couple buttons. It's not a huge deal.
I gotta say, I agree with him on this.
Yeah, not so bad. Not so guilty. The next thing he does when he gets out of the shower is he presses play. He sees they have some messages. You gotta remember, this is 2002, and they're actually
machines.
Yeah, actually still answering machines. So Scott plays the messages, and he hears his own message, which makes him think that she wasn't there to even get that one initially. And then he also hears a message from Laci's stepdad. And Laci's stepdad had called to say, hey, when you guys come over later today, can you please bring some whipped cream? We don't have any for the pies. And this is the first time that he starts getting concerned because, his assumption is, okay, if you weren't there when I called you, I thought you were with your mother, but now they're calling us asking for something. So he immediately calls her family and starts ringing alarm bells and asking, is she with you? Which immediately, obviously she's not, and everyone starts getting concerned. And he calls them at 5:17. At 5:18, the family is on like a full-on search. So Scott takes Mackenzie and he's walking around the neighborhood, seeing if he can see any sign of her. Maybe something happened and she fell over. She's 8 months pregnant at this time, so anything can happen. And the family's driving around. The family's making calls, and by 5:47, her stepdad calls 911. And this is again something that people often point to, like, well, why on earth
Why wasn't it Scott? Yeah,
Scott calls her dad, like, no, call 911. But again, to play devil's advocate, like, if I came home and my husband wasn't home, the first thing I'm not going to do is call 911. I'm going to, like, call the people who he might be with and not try and overreact right away. But her dad calls 911, and by 6:50, so it's about an hour later, Modesto police arrive. And the first detective on the scene is Al Brocchini. And he looks around at the house. Scott lets him in without a warrant and says, yes, absolutely, look around. Everything looks undisturbed. And there's nothing really there to go off of, but Al Brocchini says, like, right from the get-go, Scott's demeanor is wrong. He's concerned with them, like, when they're in the driveway and opening the doors. He doesn't want them to, like, scratch his truck. He's making them use coasters under all their drinks. And he's like, he's not a grieving husband. He's not a concerned husband. And so immediately, whether it's his instincts or not, the first thing a lot of police do is talk to the people close. So they bring Scott in for an interview that night. And so from 12 a.m. to 1 a.m., there is a videotaped interview of Scott giving his, testimony of the day and basically telling him, like, listen, this is what I did. This is where I was. And, he's asking all the important questions, like, was there problems in your marriage? And Scott says no, they have a pretty normal marriage. They have a baby on the way. He loved Laci and didn't have anything to do with her disappearance. Now, something to mention, and I don't know when this takes place exactly, so there's a caveat here. So I've seen reports, and I think this was something that at the time in 2002, 2003, 2004, when this was going on, that I heard beat into the ground over and over, was on December 24th, so this is the same day she goes missing. At some point, I can't find a timestamp for any of this, it's reported that Scott ordered the Playboy channel.
What a creep.
Well, yeah, so, but when I was, like, looking back again, this to me was something, like, one of, like, the highlights. Like, yeah, he like, killed his wife, he had an affair, he ordered the Playboy channel. Like, I could have, like, said this over and over.
Right.
But when I went back and looked, like, all I could find was from, like, 2004, and it was, like, People Magazine, there was some, like, NBC, CBS, but it was, like, a one-and-done reporting. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, because what I'm finding in Scott's case is everyone was super anxious, and, like, as soon as something suspicious would come out, everyone would report on it as fact. And then there were some things that, as they found out, weren't true. They would, like, the media wouldn't even back out. They would just pretend like it never happened. So instead of, like, writing a retraction or saying, like, hey, I know we reported this, but here's actually what happened, they just dropped it. So it was reported back in 2004 that somewhere on the 24th, and again, I don't know where, because he, like, gets home, showers, apparently looks for her, and then, like, is in police custody. So I don't know when it was, but apparently he orders the Playboy channel, and then a couple of days later, he orders, like, I think it was like 5 days later, he orders, like, more explicit pornography channels, which, again, I can't, like, show any court documents. I haven't gone through all the court documents. It's like 30,000 pages, but all I have are these news, so, take it with a grain of salt. But if it's real shady. Like, real shady.
Definitely suspicious.
So at this point, it takes us into Christmas Day, like, worst Christmas Day of all time, but
Seriously.
Christmas Day. And the police ask him to take a polygraph. And at this point, like, his family, he's willing to, but his family says, let's wait. Like, wait till you have a lawyer. Like, and even I, like, if I could say anything, if my husband was missing, I wouldn't take a polygraph. Like, They can't be used in court for a reason. It's, not an exact science, but this obviously is something that police use to decide if people are being honest. Even like, will they take it or won't they take it, gives a kind of indication.
It's an indicator, right?
Right. So his whole family urges him not to take the polygraph. So originally he says yes, then he backs out and says no. And again, warning flags for the police that just go flying. So on the 26th, the media starts to get a hold of this case. And for them, it's perfect. And I think this is what added to the perfect storm of this case is there is no real like breaking news coming out like on or before or after Christmas. So the news cycle is dead, and in 2002 is when the 24-hour news cycle actually had just begun, and they're constantly trying to fill their stream, and so they start flocking to his house, and he has basically a media hub just parked on his front lawn, and at this point, people start coming forward and telling the family, like, hey, I know what's going on. Like, I'm in the neighborhood. I see all the police. I've seen the news media. I've seen the reports. And I think I've seen Laci walking that day. And so all of this went to the police. The family would say, hey, to Detective Albrocchini, to whoever, like, go talk to these people. They said they've seen Laci. Maybe this will help us find her. And what they're finding is they're assuming that the police are vetting all of this. What we learn later is I don't think they did a great job of that. Even early on, they really had their sights set on Scott. So we find out later that there were almost 24 sightings of Laci on the 24th walking her dog.
What?
Yeah, but none of this really gets into any formal report or it doesn't play into the prosecution's theory at all of what happened.
Yeah, I mean, not like I was at the trial or anything, but I had definitely never heard that.
Right. So on the 26th, the police asked, they did an initial like look around on the 24th, but on the 26th, they asked him to do a formal search of the place where they would actually try and collect evidence, do fingerprinting, all of that. And what we hear in the media is that Scott denied them and that they went in with a search warrant. Scott's version and his family's version of this is Scott had an attorney at this time, and he said, yeah, I'm fine with it. Let me clear it with my attorney. And Scott didn't hear back from his attorney in time, and the police just got restless and said, well, we were basically just asking to see what you would say. We have a warrant anyways. And they served the warrant at 5 p.m. on the 26th and did a full sweep of the house. Hi, Crime Junkies. In case you missed it, I host another weekly podcast called The 27th. At this point, again, we're all about Scott, and everyone's saying that Scott isn't reacting how they want him to react. He really wants nothing to do with the media, which
makes sense. Again,
people say is suspicious. They, a lot of people in the stories that I've read had been like, if it was my wife, I would want all the media attention I could get. I would do all the interviews, do anything to help find her. I always try and be really, I don't know. I don't like to.
Those are really bold statements. No one knows how they're going to react in a situation like this.
Exactly. Like, I try and not say, like, if I was this person. I am not a 27-year-old male who just lost his wife and child or that they're just missing. I have no clue how I would react, and even my reaction probably has nothing to do with someone else's reaction. So, but I will say, I mean, I try not to do it, but I've been guilty of it before, of like, looking at somebody being like, I mean, dude, like, you're looking fish. So...
Right. I think everyone has especially in a public case like that.
Right.
You just automatically project your expectations on the situation.
Right. And this, of course, is, I think, what the media picks up on the most. And, of course, like, I think one of the biggest names in this case at the time was Nancy Grace. And, yeah, she's got some, like, great one-liners about this case, but... She says that essentially she wanted to crucify Scott because he, quote, rubbed me the wrong way. So he has all of the media essentially just saying that he's guilty and judging his every single move because they don't feel like he's acting appropriately. But at this point, Laci's family is still really supportive of Scott. They have his back. At every press conference, they're standing by his side, and they're really trying to get police to find Laci because they think she could still be out there at this point. Now, I have to give you a little backstory of what's going on at the time. While we have this big case going on, little crimes don't stop. So around the same time, the people who lived across the street from the Petersons actually had reported a robbery. They were away for Christmas, and when they came back, their place had been broken into, and then they report this. So the neighbor actually reports seeing people in the front yard of the house that was broken into, and she drives by, they give her the stank eye, and she doesn't actually report it at the time, but it's once she knows there's a robbery, she lets the police know what she saw. And the police actually, within a couple of days, actually apprehend the guys who were responsible for this robbery. But when they go to arrest them, the first thing that these guys say isn't anything about the robbery. Without being prompted or asked, the first thing they say is, I had nothing to do with that pregnant girl.
Whoa.
Yeah, a little suspicious. And the way that they said that the robbery went down, these guys who are, talking to police, and they say, they had a safe in their house. We took the safe out and put it on the front lawn. And after the police talked to them for a couple of days, they actually make an announcement on December 30th. And again, these are like going on simultaneously, these two cases, but no one's really connecting them. And the police, whether intentional or unintentional, are really keeping them totally separate cases. But they make an announcement at a press conference that these guys had been apprehended, case has been solved for this robbery, and that the robbery took place on the 26th.
Wait a minute. On the 26th?
Yes.
When there was media crawling all up and down the street.
Right. So this is what is really sketchy about this. So they're saying that the way the robbers say what they did is they took the safe out of the house, they put the safe on the front lawn while they scoured the rest of the house, and the police are saying, yeah, you did this on the 26th, but there's people from the media that are like, yeah, that's not possible because there were, tens of 20, 30 people outside of the Peterson home, which is, again, directly across the street. And he's like, if there were people robbing a home, even if they looked inconspicuous, if they put a safe on the front yard, at least one person is going to recognize this. So the people who were there that day, even the media that wants to crucify him, if they were the ones on site, they're saying there's no way that this went down on the 26th, and they really believe it went down on the 24th. So
interesting.
Right. The same day that they decide to we're putting case closed on this, that very day they had gotten a call from Amber Fry. And Amber Fry, again, anyone who knows a smidgen about this case knows that really she is the case.
This turned everything upside down.
Right. So they get a call from her that she knew Scott. She had been having an affair with Scott. She didn't know he was married. And the police actually convinced her that they're going to have her be their spy. And so they go to Radio Shack, again, 2002. They go to Radio Shack and buy a recorder, and from the 30th on, Amber is recording all of her calls with Scott. Now, again, at this time, there's a media frenzy surrounding the case. I remember hearing reports, and I don't know if you do, of the house smelling like bleach. There was that mop and bucket, which they, again, never said directly, but they would talk about it smelling like bleach and then show pictures of the mop and bucket. There was no smell of bleach in the house. There was zero evidence. The search that they did on the 26th, they didn't find a speck of blood. They didn't find a smell of bleach. Other than the floor being mopped, which Scott said Laci did, there wasn't evidence of crazy cleanup. The only evidence they found was when they searched his work shed. They found a single piece of Laci's hair and a pair of pliers that were rusted shut. And this isn't, to me at least, a huge deal, because, I mean, it's his wife. Like, I shed like a dog.
I was gonna say, like, I will show up on many crime scenes if all it takes is a strand of my hair.
Right. And so this is also something, though, that Al Brocchini, the lead detective, actually gets in some trouble for later in the trial. Is dude flat out, like, altered his reports and kind of lied because he didn't like he, in his mind, Scott did it and he was trying to hide this whole life from Laci. So what he writes in his report is that, Laci had never been to the marina. She had never been to his workbench. She didn't even know he owned a boat or knew about this place. But there were actually reports of people who had seen Laci at his workshop or at the marina like a day before. So, and then Al Brocchini basically has to admit, like, yeah, I had heard that from witnesses, but I basically neglected to put it in the file. I know. To jump back to Amber, so when she'd called police, again, something that I think I didn't realize and that the media sure didn't make a good job of pointing out is I thought they had this long affair and they were super involved. They had been dating 5 weeks before Laci disappeared, and they saw her. I mean, literally, I think he saw her 4 times. And she had been introduced to him from a coworker. The coworker thought he was single, and Scott's telling her he's looking for the one. She has no clue he's married, and he tells her that he's going to Europe for the holidays. Because right before he tells her this, on December 9th, he basically drops a bombshell on her and says, I lied to you. I was married, but I lost my wife, and this is going to be the first Christmas that I spend without her. And he says, I'm going to Europe, but when I get back from Europe, we can really talk more about this, and I can explain to you my reasoning for lying, and I'm just super vulnerable, bullshit.
The whole "I lost my wife" line, and I know that's exactly what he said because I remember it, and it's just super eerie to me. I lost my wife. She didn't die. She's not missing. Obviously, she wasn't missing yet, but I lost her. Oh.
Yeah. Well, and this girl is living under a GD rock because, no joke, she didn't. So Laci goes missing on the 24th. It's pretty much, we were literally going to war with Iraq, but all the news was talking about was Scott Peterson.
No, I totally remember.
She didn't see any of it, but until the 30th, and that's, right when she found out, her friend showed her a newspaper article, and she sees a fuzzy, grainy picture of Scott, and it's he looks familiar. And then is oh, he's also a fertilizer salesman who also lives in Modesto? And finally, girl puts the pieces together. And so she calls the police, and that's when they make their whole deal. And this is when things get, I feel so shady. So on the 31st, Amber is now working with police. Scott has told her that he is off in Europe somewhere for the new year.
He was spending New Year's Eve in Paris.
New Year's Eve in Paris, how cute. So on New Year's Eve, in the real world and not Scott's fantasy world, his wife is still missing, and her family holds a candlelight vigil for her. And 2 really big things happen here that I think have played huge into the trial and the conviction and the media's conviction of him. One is there is a picture of him holding a candle at this vigil, damn near laughing. And this, of course, was the picture that was posted on every magazine, every newspaper, every website. And they basically said his wife has been missing for a week. He isn't mourning at all. He's not talking at all. And he's just sitting here acting like this is a joke. And his family says, that's not true at all. Of course, they picked the one picture that's going to give them the best headlines. And his sister said that he was talking to his niece or something at the time and had a sweet moment with his niece, and he was smiling at her or because of her or something like that. And of course, they snapped the picture then. And really, if you're selling magazines, that's the picture that's going to get you a ton of buys.
100%.
So they've got that. And maybe that by itself would have been like, yeah, fishy, but not so much. But on top of that, what we get later is right before he goes to get on stage with her family as they make a plea for Laci to come home or for someone who has her to let her go, we get this call to Amber that is just like, it makes my heart drop into my butt.
Yes.
Okay, there you go. I'm talking.
Okay, I'm like, stay still or something.
I know, I was making it work.
How was your New Year's?
What's that?
How was your New Year's?
It's good. I went to the bar now, so I came out of an alley. Quiet alley. Is that nice?
Yeah, it is. I can hear you. Very good.
It's pretty awesome. Fireworks and everything for the Eiffel Tower. The people all playing their rock
He
songs.
called her.
It's pretty funny.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you guys decided to go out. Who?
Oh, definitely.
I can never remember your friend's name. I know Jeff, but you always say,
Okay, you're not doing a great job at convincing me that this guy did not do it.
I know. I mean,
That call is ridiculous.
to be fair, again, I'm not trying to convince you that he's not a slime ball because this dude is gross. But just keep listening. So that's New Year's Eve. Again, no one knows this at the time except for Amber and the police and obviously Scott. But at this time, Laci's family is still fully standing by Scott. No one knows at this point that he has even had an affair, has a girlfriend. He's just kind of still the husband that's not acting like everyone thinks he should act. But the police have nothing. All they have are these phone calls to Amber. But the more phone calls they get, the less they even try and look at anything else. I mean, the more they're focused on Scott. And while this is all going on, Scott is basically just being tried through the media. And here's another example. There's a girl named Kristen D. Smart who went missing years before. And the media goes on a rampage and gets a bee in their bonnet and decide oh my God, Scott went to college, the same place that she went missing. What if he did this? What if he's this serial killer who's just attacking women? And so for a while, that's all that was in the news, is everyone linking Scott to this other girl's disappearance. And it ends up being that there's zero connection whatsoever. Scott had nothing to do with it. The police say he has nothing to do with it. But again, it's one of those things where the media was, gung-ho to report it, and it was all they wanted to talk about. As soon as he's not, convicted or not even associated with it officially,
They forget it ever happened.
yeah, they just pretend like they never said anything, and they can't even be bothered to report by the way, he's been cleared, because that doesn't fit into the narrative that they're creating.
Right.
On January 6th, we get another really interesting call to Amber. So Scott actually confesses to Amber that he is Scott Peterson and his wife is missing. And I can't figure out why he would do this. And I think we've got a clip of the call we can play.
I'm so sorry that this has happened, and I'm so sorry I'm going to hurt you in this way. I don't want to do this over the phone. I want to tell you this. I want to be there in person and tell you this. But I'm sure that's why Saki called you.
what?
I'm sure it's why Saki called you.
Why would that? What are you talking about?
It's the worst thing. Sorry, Amber. Well, I'll just tell you.
Okay.
You haven't been watching the news, obviously.
No.
I have not been traveling during the last couple weeks. I've lied to you when I've been traveling.
Okay.
The girl I got married to, her name is Laci.
Mhm.
She disappeared just before Christmas.
Mhm.
For the past 2 weeks, I've been in Modesto with her family and mine, searching for her.
Okay.
She just disappeared, and no one knows
Okay. Now.
where she's been.
Scott?
And I can't tell you more because I need you to be protected from the media and Ayana. Okay, they are amazing.
Scott, are
Yeah.
you listening?
I am.
You came to me earlier in December and told me that you had lost your wife. What was that about?
She's alive.
What?
She's alive.
Where? She's alive? Where?
Vanessa, now, I know, this is the hardest, I want to tell you first, you need to protect yourself from the media.
Okay.
Okay, if you've been watching the news at all, well, you haven't. The media has been telling everyone that I had something to do with her disappearance. So the past 2 weeks I've been hunted by the media. And I don't want you to be involved in this to protect yourself.
So, Britt, I can't figure out, as far as Scott knows, Amber is, dumb as a box of rocks and has no idea what's going on. And he openly confesses to her that this is the truth. I'm really married. I'm Scott Peterson. I'm in the news. Why would he do that? I mean, if she didn't already know, I can't figure out what the point of confessing to her is. If he's not going to call her and confess, and I did all of it, why just confess this little piece? If he was, I just can't. Do you have any
No,
thoughts?
I think it's a really good question because, like you said, she hasn't really questioned him on it yet. She hasn't approached him about it. She's just been going along with I am dating Scott Peterson, who has nothing to do with this other Scott Peterson whose wife is missing. And for him to call her just kind of out of the blue and confess like that does seem odd.
Right. So he confesses to her. Again, she already knows what's up, though, but she's wins the award for, Best Amateur Actress. And as we go on, so the case then breaks on January 14th because the police's jig is up. The National Enquirer gets their hands on the famous picture we've seen of Scott and Amber canoodling together at a Christmas party. And they actually call police and give them a heads up and say, hey, we have this picture. We'd love to get you to confirm that it's true. Police are never going to do that. But just letting you know, we're going to post it. So I don't know if they were being nice and saying if this is going to fuck up your investigation, heads up.
Yeah, this might be the only noble thing National Enquirer has ever done.
Right. So the police decide okay, we can't let Laci's family find out this way. We have to tell them. So they pull her mom and her stepdad in and her brother and give them a heads up of what's been going on, that they've known since the 30th. They've been recording all of the calls. Scott does have a girlfriend. Everything's true. These pictures are going to come out. And basically what the National Enquirer is reporting is true. When they tell the family, it's reported that the first thing that her mother says is, why did he have to kill her? So immediately, this changes it for the family as well. They go from being totally Team Scott to 100% thinking that he did it. And on the 24th, the police hold a press conference, and I feel like this is one of the most infamous, if not the most infamous press conference in this case, where Amber comes out and talks about their affair.
Definitely. I remember this so clearly.
I met Scott Peterson November 20th, 2002. I was introduced to him. I was told he was not married. We did have a romantic relationship.
After Amber comes out and does his press conference, again, it's this super weird reaction from Scott. He actually calls Amber, and again, in the press conference, she at no point says, I've been a spy. So Scott calls her and tells her that he's proud of her for coming forward, which is, again, super freaking weird.
So bizarre. Some of his actions just come out of left field for me.
Yeah, so I can't figure out where he's coming from because if he was being slimy, like, no part of him is angry at her. No part of him feels betrayed. He's just like proud of her for doing the right thing. And people can say whatever they want that he was acting. He had no idea that their conversations were being recorded. So at least I don't believe he'd be putting on a show. So again, it's just one of those things that it's still all super slimy, but nothing he does makes sense to me. After this goes down, Scott feels like he has to give an interview. He hasn't spoken out at any point, and he thinks that people aren't looking for Laci anymore. And over and over again, he just says, like, that is my goal. I don't want people to focus on me, and I tried staying out of the limelight, but that's making it worse. So if people want to talk to me, I'll talk to them, but you've got to stop looking at me. Or if you want to look at me, keep doing that, but you have to look for Laci while you're doing it, because I feel like all people are doing right now is looking at me, and that's not helping.
Right.
So he sits down with a couple of like local reporters and even like Diane Sawyer, like the big guns, and does an interview. And nothing good comes from this interview. He kind of lies even more. He says that he never lied about telling cops about the affair with Amber. He says he was upfront with them. But this, I can't tell if Scott believes himself or if he's lying again, because when him and his family talk about this later, they say, the police never asked him if he had a girlfriend. He never lied about having a girlfriend. They asked if their marriage was good, and Scott still loved Laci, and their marriage was good. He also tells Diane Sawyer that Laci knew about the affair, and it wasn't a secret from her. So he said that she wasn't okay with it, but she wasn't going to break up their marriage over it either. And again, no one knows how true this is because we can't ask Laci. And you would think that if she knew about it, he would be ending it, or she would have had him end it or something. But there really was no break in the affair. It went right on until she went missing. So, of course, the media and Diane Sawyer, everyone is, super suspicious of this. Then he does the thing that absolutely puts him in his grave. He is talking to Diane Sawyer, talking about how he loves Laci, and he says she is amazing.
The past tense, it's so incriminating.
At that point, everyone in America stopped listening. No, I can't tell you what he said after that. I don't think anyone can tell you what he said after that. I'm pretty sure everyone cut off the interview and just started giving commentary on the fact that he's already talking about his wife in the past tense when she's been gone for 1 month. February comes and goes. Laci, her due date passes. She's still missing. Absolutely nothing happens in March. The case is going so stale. Police have no leads. But again, even in this time where they aren't moving the case forward, they still aren't tracking down other leads. To me, this would have been a good time if the Scott angle wasn't panning out, or you at least weren't getting anything new, and it wasn't enough to convict him, it wasn't enough to take him to trial. At least spend your time looking at the other angles. Okay, who saw Laci? When did they see her? How often did they see her? How many sites do we have? Is this robbery case really a robbery case? But no.
Right, because at some point in time they had a tip line open, right?
Mm-hmm, but it just kind of goes stale. That is until something happens that changes the entire trajectory of the investigation. But you're going to have to wait until next week to find out what happens on the second part of our Scott Peterson special. Everyone, it's Paige. So what are you waiting for? Yells. It's Carbon. This episode of Crime Junkie is brought to you by Crime Stoppers of Central Indiana.
Excuse me, can I...
About crimes, if they are inferior. Merry Christmas, junkies! You know, most of the podcasts that I subscribe to and listen to the first part, make sure you 13th. And then Laci was found on the 14th, and they were found just about a mile apart. And the first body was alerted to police because someone was walking their dogs. And prior to this, you know, they had actually searched the Berkeley Marina where Scott said he was. I mean, they had done multiple searches, searched the water, didn't come up with anything. They found an anchor, a lone anchor. But they actually washed up in the San Francisco Bay, and the police say that when they initially washed up, they thought there's no way that this is our body. Like, the San Francisco Bay is too huge, bodies wash up all the time, we're just not that lucky. But sure enough, they find out that it is Laci, it is Connor, and the bodies are obviously a mess. They have been in the water for some time. We don't know exactly how long,
Connor?
but Laci was
the
just
baby.
a torso. Her arms, her legs, and her head were missing, and just her torso washed up. And then for Connor, it looked like he had been almost disemboweled, and he had some electrical tape on his ear and this fishing wire or some kind of wire that looked like a noose around his neck. So when we talk about the trial, there'll be a lot of speculation about what happened to the body and whether it was the tide or not, but they were found in extremely unusual conditions. After the body's found, obviously it takes a couple of days to identify them. And I think one of the big infamous points in the trial is on April 18th. It's Good Friday. And this is when Scott is, air quotes, running for the border and trying to escape. What happens is police arrest Scott in San Diego, and in his car, they find so many things. They find camping gear, 4 cell phones, his brother's ID, between $14,000 and $15,000 in cash, hiking boots, a shovel, a dozen Viagra, and a picture of him and Laci. And his hair is dyed blonde, and all that we hear, again, in the media is he's fleeing, he's on the run, and he was trying to, now that their bodies are found and identified, he's trying to get away. Now, if we go back again, there's always the family side of the story. And what they say happened is wildly different. So they say that day, on Good Friday, Scott was going to play golf with his family. They say that, you know, it had been just a crazy couple of months. They were just like starving for some normalcy. And so he wanted to get away. He had been actually living in San Diego for a while because he had family that lived down there. So it's not like he drove from Modesto to San Diego that day. He had been living in San Diego, and he was on his way to the golf course. He saw some unmarked cars behind him, and he thought it was the media. So he just kind of starts driving around. He actually calls his family. He doesn't want to bring the media to the golf course because, you know, getting pictures of him golfing, that would just be a nightmare. So what he doesn't know at the time, which I think ends up being good for him, is police have his phone tapped, and he actually calls his family to tell him that he's not going to make it.
I lost another set got me. Oh, brother. I don't think I should come play golf. I don't want to picture me in the press. Yeah. Good thing I'm on tune. Scott, that just sucks, man.
He ends up driving and driving and driving, and they're still following him. They're being pretty aggressive. He finally does end up going to the golf course. He doesn't know where else to go, and he pulls over, and that's when they put on their lights, and he realizes that it's been the cops the whole time and not media. And they end up arresting him and find all of the stuff in his car. But what the family will point out as well is, okay, yes, he was blonde. However, he had been blonde for a while. He had met with cops while he was blonde and had the goatee. So it's not like he was disguising himself from the cops. He was just trying to get through like day-to-day life, going to the gas station and going to the grocery store without people bombarding him. So really, he didn't change his appearance for that, which again, I never knew.
No, me neither.
No idea he met with the cops like that. And then they go to try and explain away all this stuff in the car. And say that, the $15,000 in cash was actually, his mother had borrowed some money out of his account, and the day before, they have all the transactions to prove this, but the day before, she pulled money out to pay him back, and he hadn't gotten a chance to put it in the bank yet. Again, I don't know what to believe anymore. It's like, I wouldn't be driving around with $15,000 of cash, but
But on the other hand, it's Good Friday and banks may not be open all day.
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't
etc.,
think of that.
etc.
They said he had his brother's ID because he was going to the golf course and he could get a discount with his brother's ID rather than using his ID. And then the hiking boots and stuff like that he had bought like a long time ago and left in his car. And they also point out that he's driving like a red Mercedes. And they say, like, who trades in their like pretty inconspicuous truck for a red Mercedes to...
If you're going to go on the run.
Right. So, again, what I keep coming back to with this case is, oh my God, he either, did it and he's a genius who can, kill somebody and leave zero evidence, or, he is an idiot with just, the worst luck possible. Because, I can't even imagine getting pulled over with all that stuff and just being every single one of it has this benign explanation, but altogether looks really, really shady.
Yeah, I got pulled over for speeding once, and there was a bottle of maple syrup in my front seat, and I was like, "I'm sorry, officer, this isn't liquor, it's maple syrup." The entire time.
So now that there's an arrest, there's actually a pending trial. So the defense gets all 30,000 pages of documents, and they can actually, because prior to this, the family and the defense have no right to any of the information in the investigation. They have no idea what the police do and do not have. So this is the first time they really get their hands on, okay, what do they have against Scott that they think they have such a firm case? And as they're going through all these documents, there isn't a single piece of physical evidence that suggests Scott had anything to do with the disappearance or that he had anything to do with a body dump or body removal. And they went so far back in his history to middle school, there wasn't a single incident of violence. They decided to move the trial. Instead of having it in Modesto, they said, everyone in Modesto is too tainted. We have to move this. So they move it to Redwood, California, which is about 50 miles away.
Everyone in Modesto is tainted by the trial. Everyone in the country was exposed to this case and had very strong opinions about it, because me and you in Indiana had opinions.
Right. In my mind, moving it 50 miles, we were 2,000 miles away.
It does nothing.
Right. I don't know what the point was. And actually, moving it to Redwood, they actually moved it closer to San Francisco, which was the media hub in the area. So, in my mind, I feel like they're only making it worse.
Yeah.
So initially, when they're doing jury selection, 50% of the jury pool gets automatically dismissed because they say, nope, yeah, he's for sure guilty, the end. They dismiss those people, and also they dismiss anyone who says that they're against the death penalty. And this is a death penalty case. However, what the judge was supposed to do is he's supposed to ask people, okay, I know you're against the death penalty, but that's the law here. And if we find that he's guilty, do you think that you could apply the law to this case? But he didn't do that at all. He just said, okay, you're against the death penalty, you're out, which really left a very specific type of juror left in this pool.
Yeah, an angry, vindictive one.
Right. And then we even had people from the jury. So in this documentary I watched, people who were on the jury admitted that as soon as they found out what trial they were on, even if they weren't familiar with it, they went home and just Googled. And of course, again, all we're getting is the media, their version of what happened. And that's what these prospective jurors who are now on the jury are getting all of this information before even day one of walking into the courtroom. And once they're in the courtroom, the judge makes the decision not to sequester the jury. So,
which is insane.
Insane. A trial this big, the OJ trial was about the same size and scope, and the jury was sequestered there for 8 to 10 months. And here they were allowed to go home, they were allowed to talk to their families, and again, it's against the law for jurors to research the case on their own or to like even listen to the news about it, but this case was everywhere. I don't know how they were able to get away from it.
You couldn't go grocery shopping without hearing about it, honestly.
So now that they have a jury, the prosecution finally lays out its case, and nobody knew what they were going to say because, again, there's really nothing. So everyone's really interested to see what their story was. And the prosecution says that Laci was killed on the 23rd. He cleans up, moves her body in the morning to his truck, and that he takes it to the marina and dumps it. And their whole motive is that basically he did not want to be a father. He did not want to be married anymore. It was all too much. He wanted to live the life of a young single guy, and he just thought it would be easier to murder her than to get divorced. The defense gets up in their opening arguments and basically says, you know, what we all know. They say, you aren't gonna like my client. Like, he's done some stupid shit and he's not necessarily a nice guy or a nice husband or a faithful husband, but we're gonna prove to you that he is an innocent husband of murder. And they have this great like gotcha moment right in their opening trial. So the prosecution, when they were laying out their scene of the crime or their way it went down, they're going through all of his lies and like he lied about this. And one of the lies that they point out is, you know, he has this whole fabricated story about how he was spending the morning with Laci. Really, he didn't spend the morning with her. He says they were watching Martha Stewart and that she was baking lemon meringue cookies, but she wasn't. So he's obviously lying about that. Blah blah blah. And in the defense's opening statement, they actually bust out the episode of Martha Stewart. She was on Good Morning America, I think, that day, and they play the clip of her on Good Morning America, and sure enough, she's talking about lemon meringue cookies. So even
That's amazing.
It is. It's like kind of a Perry Mason moment. Like whoever the prosecution was didn't even bother to watch the clip. They're just, I'm kind of like the media. They're just saying things that they want to be true. And they actually got caught red-handed. Another huge moment for the defense in this trial is when the prosecution calls their computer witness. So every time the prosecution's bringing somebody up, it's kind of like a 1-2 punch. Like, yeah, they say some good stuff for the prosecution, but then the defense gets up and kind of gets them to either refute what they say, contradict themselves. But the jury said that every time a prosecution witness came up, basically when they got off the stand, they either felt like the defense was ahead or the prosecution didn't get ahead. So the defense was doing super well. Prosecution calls up the computer witness to talk about the computer activity on Scott's work computer, where he was in his warehouse that morning when I said he was emailing his boss and putting together this like tool thing. And they don't ask any further questions. Well, when the defense gets up, they say, you know, was there any computer activity in the home that morning? And sure enough, it wasn't in this guy's report. It wasn't anywhere else, but he's on the stand and has to testify truthfully. He says that morning, around 8:40 in the morning, Laci or someone was looking at like a red scarf from Gap or something like that, and then a sunflower umbrella. And this basically blows the prosecution's theory out of the water because at this point, Laci's supposed to be dead.
Right.
And now someone is on the computer at her home looking up stuff, and everyone said, you know, Laci was obsessed with sunflowers and whatever. So now she's all of a sudden alive. And, you know, there's some back and forth later. So at this point, the prosecution doesn't know where or how. All they have is when. But by the time this guy gets off the stand, they don't have how she was murdered. They don't have where she was murdered, when she was murdered. And they basically have a loose why. But they basically have no case at this point. But they keep going. And then they try and say, well, you know, Scott was just trying to cover his tracks. And so he got on and looked at stuff on the computer that Laci would look up. Well, if that's the case, why wouldn't Scott be using that in his defense? This didn't come out until the middle of trial. The police have been saying she was dead on the 23rd for like a year at this point. Why wouldn't Scott, if he did that intentionally, be like, hey, look at the computer. I saw her on the computer. She was on the computer. It just doesn't make sense. And if that was the case, even if Laci was, so basically the prosecution changes their whole theory and they say, okay, we kind of concede to it. Laci's on the computer, then you have about an hour to kill her, clean up, and then load up her body and leave. So mid-trial, which is, they completely changed their whole theory of the case, which I think is damn near unheard of.
Yeah, that's not a good move.
Right. The prosecution also says that they found some empty, like, concrete powder bags in his workshop, and he admits that he made one anchor for his boat. And they say, well, there should be like 4 more anchors, and that's the perfect amount because Laci's limbs were missing, and whatever, you had an extra one for her head, who knows. And Scott's like, no, I dumped out the rest of that concrete in my driveway. And again, this was something that the media took off with, especially Nancy Grace. She was all over this concrete. And there's this kind of great, outside of the trial, gotcha moment where on video, they take Nancy Grace to the house to show her where Scott says he poured out the concrete, because she's just going on and on and on in the news about how that's crazy and why would anyone ever do that. And they show her where it is in the ground, and you can see it, and she just goes, huh, and then never talks about it ever again.
Man.
I know. So at this point in the trial, the defense is crushing it. And all the jurors even say, like, they had nothing. The prosecution had nothing. And we were all wondering kind of why we were there. But then the trial totally changes with the introduction of the tapes. When the defense gets a hold of these, they first get the transcripts of the tapes between Scott and Amber. And they realize, like, as they're reading the transcripts, like, yeah, this is, like, bad, but it's not super bad. Like, I think we can work around this. He's a bad husband, but this isn't, like, send a man to death row worthy. But they say that when they hear the tapes, it's just a totally different story. It shows that Scott has zero problem lying. And I mean, in the midst, there's not even like sadness in his voice. In the midst of everything that's going on, he's putting on this whole charade about being in Europe and being in love with her. And you would have no idea that something was going wrong in his life, much less that his wife and his child had been abducted and then murdered. So once these tapes are introduced in court, even the jurors say it's just kind of over. The defense really tries to get them to consider anything else. They actually set up this test where they take 150-pound like body-shaped weight in the same size boat that Scott had and tried to show that it would be impossible to put something that heavy over the side of a boat without capsizing or flipping the boat. And they tested it 4 times, and every single time they couldn't do it without flipping the boat. And the guy that actually did the test almost drowned twice. But the court wouldn't allow any of that information in. They said it was just too inflammatory, which is, I think, a little bit crazy.
Yeah, inflammatory is definitely a little bit of a stretch.
Right. The other thing the prosecution had that really resonated with the jury is they said that they got dogs that tracked Laci's scent to the marina. The dogs had come out months after Laci went missing, and what they find, the defense finds, is that the dogs had actually failed their certification test for being tracking dogs, and twice before they had gone out and hadn't hit on Laci's scent, but that was never entered into evidence. They basically just said that they went out and saw her, smelled her immediately. There was also cross-contamination, so some of the stuff that they gave the dogs of Laci's also could have had Scott's scent on it, and of course Scott was at the marina. So I don't know, again, what order this came in, if the first 2 times that they were working off the same scent piece, or maybe the third time the one they were working off of had both rather than just Laci's. Either way, I think it was something that shouldn't have been entered in, because it's you can't have a dog that fails their certification, then doesn't hit twice. I mean, if you're not going to allow the boat thing in, I don't know how this got in.
Right.
Another thing that was really contested during trial was the time of death for Connor. Because Laci was pregnant at the time, they wanted to show, again, their prosecution's whole theory is either she's killed on the 23rd or the 24th. Either way, Connor would have to be dead in the womb at that point. So the prosecution has an expert come up that says Connor's dead on the 24th. The defense has a witness come up that says Connor's dead on the 29th. So this shows that he could have actually lived in the womb 5 days longer, and 5 days later, Scott's with the media, Scott's with family, he's not doing anything. There's no way he's even got Laci, like, tucked away somewhere.
Right.
So they kind of go back and forth. The defense witness kind of breaks down on trial, like he's clearly never been cross-examined, or at least not cross-examined properly, and basically has a little bit of a meltdown and just asks people to, like, give him a break. And at that point, everyone on the jury just kind of stops listening to him. Also in court, never used, and this was a choice of the defense attorney, he never brought anyone up who said they saw Laci walking that day. Again, they saw her walking the same time that Scott's on his computer. So this would be huge. I mean, we have proof that Scott is not at home, and then sightings of Laci at the same time walking around the neighborhood. But the lawyer said it was just a judgment call. He said too many people's stories. I mean, he had, I think, like 24 witnesses.
Wow.
So he said there were too many that were, like, contradictory. I mean, when you have eyewitness testimonies, the time isn't always right. You know, it's one of the most, like, unreliable. I mean, but I think when you have 21 to 24, you've got something there.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
he just felt like it wouldn't hold up in court, so he decided to not use it at all. Jurors later said they would have loved to, like, at least hear a couple of people say, like, hey, yeah, I think I saw her. And the way they basically wrap up the trial is the defense kind of goes flat, and they just say, you know, we showed a lot of evidence, he didn't do it, they don't have any physical evidence. And the prosecution came out with a 1-2 punch, and they relied on what their whole case was based on this affair. And they have this kind of dramatic moment at the end where side by side they put up a picture of Laci, who's 8 months pregnant, alone at a Christmas party that was taken the same time as Scott is cuddling with Amber at this other Christmas party, and really hammer in, because they don't have anything else, they just hammer in motive. And sure enough, the jury comes back with a guilty verdict and sentences him to death. So in 2012, Scott has a new team of attorneys, and they've actually filed an appeal. And really there's three things that they're basing the appeal on. One is they said that the jury selection was defective, that the judge should not have allowed people who just fully, wholeheartedly believed in the death penalty. There was also a lot of jury turnover during the trial, of people who got kicked off, people who felt threatened and asked to get kicked off, and people who were talking about the case outside of the trial, which they shouldn't have been, but then didn't get kicked off. So it was very tumultuous. Yeah, lots of jury misconduct, possibly. So they're saying that that was one reason. They said that the evidence was faulty, that the only real evidence the prosecution has was that those hits on the dogs made, but that should never have been allowed in because it wasn't really 100% accurate 100% of the time. And they were saying that they should have been able to present the case of the boat. They allowed the jury to see the boat on land, and they actually let them get in it, and the jurors were, like, going back and forth, and, like, you could see that they were kind of catching on and seeing if they could push something out of the boat, but they're on land, so it doesn't really do anything.
Right.
And the prosecution, or the judge, wouldn't let them go out on water because he said it was too dangerous, which kind of, like, I feel like if you thought they were going to flip the boat, maybe proves the defense case.
Yeah, that action kind of speaks louder than words for me.
Right. So as they're going through this appeal, they get to do a full reinvestigation of the case. And one thing that they're really bringing up that was never brought up the first time is Modesto isn't this tiny, small, quaint town. The media portrayed it to be this, you know, idyllic American California town, but that's just because it really played well into their story. The motto for Modesto is water, wealth, contentment, health. But I guess everyone who lives in Modesto, they always say murder, meth, and auto theft. Like, that's their slogan. So there's, I mean, a ton of, like, seedy underbelly. I mean, they have a meth problem. There's constant robberies. And you can't even say that, like, oh, that was outside of where Scott and Laci lived in Modesto, because again, there was a robbery across the street.
There was a break-in right across the street.
Yeah, they're not too far removed for that. And then they also find this other huge, I think, story that totally gets like my wheels turning, and this is the thing that makes me question everything the most. Between 1999 and 2002, 7 pregnant women in the Modesto area go missing.
Whoa, that's a lot.
That's a lot. There's 3 in Modesto, and then 4 within an 80-mile radius of Modesto. And in 3 years, like, I don't know the rate of pregnant women going missing in Indianapolis, but I'm pretty sure it's not this.
Yeah, that seems unusually high.
Yeah. There was one woman named Evelyn Hernandez who was 8 months pregnant and disappeared within 6 months of Laci. But of course, like, the whole Laci thing was going on, so it didn't really get attention. And there was this story of a woman in a documentary that I watched who actually could have been Laci. So she was 8 months pregnant on Christmas Eve of 2002, and she said she was actually working at this little shop that she owned, and there were these men who were like stalking her outside of her shop, and she really felt threatened by them. They were following her, and so she ended up like calling her family and just staying inside and calling the police. And when she called the police, they went away. And that was earlier in the day, like shortly before Laci goes missing. And this lady ended up having her baby the same day that Connor was due. And she said she really feels like those men were after her to kidnap her. And it's her belief, and you know, when you're in this situation, it always feels probably scarier, but it's her belief that if those men would have taken her, she would have been Laci, and Laci would have been okay.
Wow, that's crazy. That's an insane story.
It is. Finally, the defense is really pushing that Connor was handled outside of the womb. He had been almost disemboweled, and they said that his injuries weren't consistent with like the tide action. That's what the prosecution tried to say, is, oh, that's just what happens when you're in water that long. But the defense doesn't think so, and they're still working on getting experts. And he had that electrical tape on his ear and that noose around his neck, and they said none of that, like, you wouldn't get tape on your ear from being in the water. Like,
right.
Not even possible. So they don't, I mean, the problem is, I think what people really want is they want a 100% story. Okay, like, well, what are happening to these other pregnant women? We don't know. Like, do they want their babies? Do they, like, has any of them gotten caught? No. So there's this kind of alternate narrative, but I don't feel like there are enough answers or enough solid answers to revoke this, like, provocative story that the media and the prosecution have told about Scott Peterson. So I don't know what to believe. If I'm being honest, so when I came into the story, I was kind of like everyone else. Like, I've heard this, he did it. The first time I went through all of this, it was so much new information that I thought, oh my God, like, there's no way. There's no way he did it. The second time I go through it, I think, okay, all of this is super new. It's super interesting. But again, my God, he's got to be the most unlucky man in America to have all of this happen to him. And he's got to be the dumbest man in America. And, like, what are the odds that this guy is just such a crappy husband and is so stupid, and this happens to his wife? So now I don't know what to think. I think, like, where I land is based on the evidence, 100% he should not have been convicted. He should not have been sentenced to death. I have no idea what happened to Laci.
Yeah. I mean, at the beginning of these episodes, I said that I was 100% sure that Scott did it, and you definitely gave me a lot of things to think about and a lot of things to reconsider. I'm with you. If he didn't do it, he is the unluckiest guy on the planet.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I'm not sure where I fall either.
Everyone I talk to seems super divided on this. I mean, they're either...
Well, thank you guys so much for listening, and comment down below. What do you guys think about it? Is Scott guilty? I don't know. And just continue working on your project, guys. Don't give up. I know sometimes it gets hard and long and a lot of work, but keep going because the results are amazing. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys sometime soon.